Thank you for attending our press conference today. I'm Kathy Bunting-Howarth, Associate Director of New York Sea Grant, an Assistant Director with Cornell Cooperative Extension, here with Ava Fenningdorf and Catherine Cornett, students from Cornell. Today, we're very interested in speaking to you about the role of climate, oceans, and the important role that university systems can have in addressing our climate change goals. Cornell University believes that breakthrough science can be adapted into real-world solutions to address the climate change challenge during our most critical decade. Fueled by the collaborative spirit of Cornell's faculty, the 2030 Project is helping to remove silos, activate research, and leverage existing expertise across all disciplines to find solutions now. Our oceans are the greatest heat sink on the planet and are also a significant carbon sink. However, climate change is adversely impacting our oceans. They're becoming more acidic and they absorb more carbon dioxide, and oxygen levels are decreasing, so that ocean acidification is decreasing our ability for carbon sequestration by mollusks and crustaceans. As ocean temperatures increase, fish and their habitats are threatened. Ocean currents are changing, which impact our migratory routes of various aquatic species. These uncertainties associated with exactly how climate change is going to impact where and how our fish live makes our ability to deal with conflicting uses such as shipping, offshore energy siting, and commercial fishing areas challenging, not to say nonetheless. However, in order to achieve climate as well as biodiversity and ecosystem goals, we must do better. We must fund and utilize the best research to intelligently invest in renewable energy, wind, solar, wave, and tidal power. We must utilize research-informed, nature-based solutions to protect our shoreline communities and economies, as well as their ecosystems. New technologies should be developed and implemented to reduce emissions from ocean-based shipping, fishing, and aquaculture. Science and research can inform decisions to assist communities and their economies in rectifying the damage caused by climate change through sea level rise, ocean warming, and ocean acidification. All of this cannot happen without innovative funding and financing needed to slow down the warming and increase coastal communities and their economies' resilience to climate change. Universities can support systematic ocean observation, conduct novel research to develop models, tools, technologies, and best practices to address climate and ocean challenges and opportunities for both mitigation and adaptation. Through extension and engagement programs, universities can bring traditional ecological knowledge and lived experiences of the communities into the research process and then deliver the results directly to those who can use them. Most importantly, universities such as Cornell can provide teaching, research, and engagement opportunities for our youth so that they can continue and enhance the efforts underway at this year's COP. An example of how universities can link science and students with our oceans and coastal communities is the New York Sea Grant program. New York Sea Grant is one of 34 Sea Grant programs located across the country. They are collaborative programs between our federal government, the Department of Commerce and NOAA, Cornell University, and the State University of New York. We fund research of relevance to coastal communities and extend those research findings to our communities. We do it through supporting students, through research funding, as well as fellowship opportunities. We fund interesting research in this area related to tagging fish and understanding how migratory routes and how the lived experiences of our fish in our oceans and coasts operate. We're understanding more about food webs as aquatic invasive species change the ecosystems in our local areas. We're also trying to understand how toxic algae and other harmful algal blooms will grow and change under climate change. We fund innovative research. One project is looking at enhancing community resilience by optimizing the symbiotic offshore and renewable energy systems and needs with our food systems. We also help communities that are undergoing historic flooding based on, due to changes in our ecosystems, climate change, and a multitude of factors, including human development as well. We promote citizen science in areas that are prone to increased flooding due to sea level rise. These pictures are from a community in New York City that experienced flooding without rain. It's nuisance flooding that's going to be exacerbated by sea level rise. And that citizen science data has been used by the City of New York in order to fund a more extensive flood monitoring network in their communities. We partner with other Sea Grant programs and are developing research coordination networks, looking at how people are being displaced and how people are choosing to move based on climate change, among multiple other factors. We're really interested in looking regionally in the United States, learning from international experiences with this type of work, and we're really interested in how this type of migration can reduce inequities that already exist in some of our cities and rural communities. We work with researchers and our extension programs throughout the state in order to build a Cornell Climate Stewards program where we teach community volunteers climate science, climate impacts, climate adaptation, climate mitigation, how to communicate about climate change, how local governments work, all to create a cadre of volunteers that are equipped with the knowledge needed to help local governments implement goals related to climate change, whether it's adaptation or mitigation. Many of our rural communities and smaller communities just don't have the professional capacity to make great strides. And finally, as I noted earlier, we engage with our students. And so we do that through a John Knaus Fellowship, where graduate students can spend a year in Washington, D.C. in either the executive or legislative branches. We work with our partners at NOAA on coastal management and fisheries fellowship opportunities. And for law students, we have our own coastal resilience law and policy program in the state of New York. We also partner with professors such as Dr. Chatrachen and Dr. Eisman. And we ask students to serve as our consultants and ask them really difficult questions. And so an example of those today are here with us today. We have Eva Fenningdorf, who is going to talk about her student project.
Hi everyone, I'm Eva Fenningdorf. I'm an undergraduate student at Cornell University, and today I'm going to be talking about oceans and climate change, specifically a review and recommendations for the Ocean Dialogue. So the main purposes and intended outcomes of the Ocean Dialogue is first and foremost to provide a designated space for discussions surrounding the ocean and climate change. The founding principles of the Ocean Dialogue include the understanding that biodiversity, climate change, and ocean health are intrinsically linked. Consequently, the ocean has a great potential to effectively mitigate climate change. However, if solutions are not implemented, it has the potential to worsen the climate crisis and increase emissions. Since oceans are such a powerful resource, they must be central to global policy discussions, and this is achieved through the Ocean Dialogue. The Ocean Dialogue is important due to the universal ocean issues of biodiversity, industry impact, and vulnerability felt globally. In a business-as-usual scenario, a majority of marine species will face high risk of extinction by 2100, and coral reef cover will collapse to less than 10% of its current size by 2050. Harmful practices of various industries are linked to decreased ocean health due to continued emissions and improper waste disposal. This is especially true within the industries of fishing, mining, and shipping. The Ocean Dialogue's direct focus on ocean-related issues provides a designated space to address risks of all types, particularly among nations who are most vulnerable, such as developing and small island nations. Although the Ocean Dialogue is a beneficial tool, there are future opportunities to render it more effective. The first is ocean-based solutions for mitigation and adaptation. While NDCs are increasingly incorporating ocean-specific measures, the ocean should be included in pre-existing goals such as adaptation, loss and damage, and mitigation, rather than treated as an isolated system. Strengthening of the dialogue framework itself is also a way to make the process more effective. There's a need to increase inclusion of developing countries and small island nations since they will be the most impacted, and overall promote strengthened collaboration between all parties. It would be beneficial to build a more tangible framework through the creation of permanent chairs and facilitators while simultaneously building a mandate surrounding the process. Currently, participation in the Ocean Dialogue is completely voluntary by parties, and so the creation of a mandate and agenda will encourage critical negotiations regarding the ocean. Lastly, to ensure implementation of ocean-based solutions, global financial support is essential. This is particularly true in developing nations where adaptive measures are the most needed and the tools to implement them are least accessible. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Catherine Cornett, and I'll now speak about our report on coastal vulnerability in the Kingdom of Tonga. My group's research on Tonga's vulnerability to climate change has stressed the impact of coastal flooding on the nation, and we focused on this topic because it's one of the greatest threats to both human and non-human ecosystems on the island. There are several reasons why coastal flooding will be an issue for Tonga. The El Niño Southern Oscillation Cycle, or ENSO, will lead to periods of drought and extreme rainfall throughout the Pacific region. ENSO is an irregular variation of wind and ocean temperature over the tropical eastern Pacific Ocean, and during La Niña years, it can cause rainfall to be increased up to 3 times the monthly average, which can lead to severe and devastating flood impacts on the island's low-lying communities. Rising sea levels caused by global warming, as well as tropical storms and periods of extreme rainfall, will also increase the frequency and intensity of coastal flooding. As an island nation, many of Tonga's densest communities are located on the coastline and are therefore extremely vulnerable to sea level rise and coastal flooding. Beyond the inundation of low-lying communities, other detrimental effects of coastal flooding include the erosion of shorelines and the intrusion of salt water into agriculture lands and aquifers, which can be detrimental to human health and well-being. The deterioration of coastal infrastructure can also be incredibly severe when facing storms and repeated exposure to salt water. Our research has informed many key impacts of coastal flooding on the Tongan community. The country's heavy reliance on the agriculture, fishing, and tourism industries could have dire effects on the economy when they begin to suffer due to climate change. These sectors would be affected even further because as an island nation, Tonga relies heavily on agriculture and fishing imports for food security. Coastal flooding also causes saltwater intrusion, which can impact the water supply, and pooling water can quickly become a breeding ground for diseases impacting human health. The flood impacts on wastewater, transportation, and building infrastructure could isolate parts of the community and hinder critical emergency responses. In a worst-case scenario, if coastal flooding makes certain areas of the country unlivable, there is a fear of mass migration, which threatens the loss of culture and traditions that are integral to the Polynesian way of life. The recommendations we included in our report span a variety of industries. First, the implementation of an integrated monitoring system for climate data and hazardous weather events would help with early warnings and evacuations for incoming tsunamis and storms. While Tonga already has a monitoring system, it should be established for the entire nation and integrated into the climate portal to share information. Increasing hard infrastructure like groins, tetrapods, and man-made seawalls have proved effective in other locations around the world. Looking at soft infrastructure, we highlighted projects like replanting mangroves, reforestation along the coastline, and coral reef restoration. Finally, an overall increase in flooding to support these projects and others is essential to help the Kingdom of Tonga fortify itself against coastal flooding. Thank you.
So I hope you can see how we live in a very interconnected world and how our oceans and coasts are extremely important while we look to ways to mitigate our impacts on the environment, mitigate climate change, get to zero emissions, and provide the resources that communities need in order to adapt and be resilient to climate change. Not just come back to the same point, but to improve for their ecosystems, their communities, and their economies. We're happy to take any questions you might have. Yes, Allison.
Hello. So for the students, through which mechanism did you do this work? Was it through a partnership with the UN?
So
And
this
a course that we have at Cornell?
Yes, so this project was first started in September through a course I'm enrolled in at Cornell University. It is the Global Climate Change and Science Policy course through the CALS program. And it really gave us a chance to dive in on topics that are very relevant right now in the UN. And while it is an ongoing process, our report is not finalized. I've really enjoyed the opportunity to learn so much about a country that I didn't know and to really try to help come up with adaptation solutions for them for the future.
Great, thank you. And a question for Catherine. The Climate Stewards Program, is that a program that's available throughout the United States, or is that something in New York State, and could it be expanded?
The Cornell Climate Stewards Program is designed specifically for New York. A lot of the examples are based on New York law, New York case studies. We even have to have a separate unit for New York City because the government structures there are so much different than our other home rule communities. It is adaptable to other states, other places across the world. It is a great way to create a group of informed, educated citizenry that can then work with local governments to help us get closer to the goals that were established. Okay. Anyone else? I think we're going to go ahead and take pictures unless there's one other question. Okay. Thank you for your time.